Welcome to another exciting episode of Plumbing 101. Now, my name is Willem. I'm your host, and in this specific episode, we'll be discussing what it costs to be in business. Now, we'll be looking at factors like what it takes to start up new business, what factors to consider, and what factors affect your budgeting, and how correctly calculating your costing can affect the success of your business. Now, having the know-how and the applicable qualifications do indeed help a lot, but a lack of proper knowledge about finances and financial management can make starting up a new business a very difficult process. But before we delve into the details of what it costs to be in business, let's cross over to Naomi for some industry-related news.
Hello and welcome to the news. My name is Naomi. The CHIPS and Science Act of 2022 was passed by the US Congress to the delight of the International Association of Plumbing and Mechanical Officials. This law includes the establishment of a National Institute of Standards and Technology program for the premise plumbing research in collaboration with the US Environmental Protection Agency. The association has pushed for this federal policy in Washington, D.C. for more than 10 years. The bill is now on its way to the White House, where President Biden is anticipated to sign it into law. The International Association has been working with the National Institute of Standards and Technology for several years to promote plumbing research, particularly regarding effectiveness, resilience, and the introduction of waterborne dangers like Legionella caused by changes in how water flows through plumbing fixtures. In local news, in Pietermaritzburg, Msunduzi has been urged to assist with the municipality's deteriorating water infrastructure. This was stated in a report made to the South African Human Rights Commission by Msunduzi Association of Residents, Ratepayers and Civics, also known as MARC. MARC claimed in a statement that political meddling and government inefficiency prevented the city from effectively carrying out its role of providing water, describing the crisis in Msunduzi as catastrophic. According to MARC, locals have lost faith in the government, which has caused them to come up with their own innovative solutions to bridge the gaps in service delivery. Well, that's it for now. Let's take it back to studio with Willem.
Thanks to Naomi for the news and for bringing us up to date with what's going on in the plumbing industry as we speak. Now, with me in studio, I have my two guests that are going to join us for this conversation. I have with me Mr. Leroy Richardson, and I have with me Mr. Lee Smith. Now, Lee, you may know of the PRB, but Lee also owns various companies in different spheres of businesses, different aspects of businesses. Leroy also has a startup plumbing company, and he's been owning that company for a while. And gentlemen, a warm welcome to you, and thanks Stack for your time and effort in joining me in this conversation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So before we start off, I'd like to give each of you just a brief opportunity just to introduce yourself to the audience and the listeners and the viewers out there. Leroy, if we can start with you. I know that you're a qualified, licensed and registered plumber, that you have experience, you own your own company, you started your own company, and that you've got experience in the maintenance section, but you also have a proper qualification, the diploma that you got from was it the London Institute?
It was the London Institute, City and Guilds. I actually did maintenance for about maybe 4 years before I decided to do a plumbing trade. And I thought that, well, if I'm going to do a trade, I might as well do it properly, because, you never want to be left behind. I got my trade diploma, then I got my red seal, and then I got my PIRB license.
And eventually you started to think, right, I'm employed by an employer currently, but I'd like to start my own thing. And then you established Tanzanite Plumbing, is that correct? Tanzanite
Yes.
Plumbing and Maintenance.
Yes. Thinking constantly that it could be done better, I could do better, I would like to do it a different way. Even down to, I wish I had a different tool on site. And the only way to really get that done is to do it yourself. And that is the reason why I do what I do. I like to do it properly because it's fun. I enjoy doing what I do.
Just before we started recording, offline, you and I had a discussion, and you mentioned something about in certain aspects when you were employed by another employer, you were held back to not being able to do things according to the requirements of standards and regulations and so things. It was more of a rush of things to get to the next site, and that prohibited you from doing things in the correct way. And that was also what sort of drove you to start your own thing.
Yeah, it's when you work for someone who owns a few different teams, have a few different sites running, it can get a bit much to keep everything on track. And if something goes wrong, you need to move things around to try and make sure that everything across the board is all right. And unfortunately, sometimes rushing a team means they don't get enough time to do the minor little checks on the system that they should. And it holds you back. If you know you need an hour to do it properly, and your employer tells you, it's like, listen, you have to be here and there in the next 20 minutes, you have to do what you're told. You have to do it in 20 minutes, because if you don't, there'll be an even bigger issue at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so, like, the fact that you need to hurry up and get to another problem is not going to go away. It just gets bigger and bigger the longer you leave it. So if you don't hurry up, it just gets worse.
Absolutely. Lee, I do know that you've obtained a degree in construction management from the Pretoria Technikon, or currently known as Tshwane University of Technology. You started off in your family business of construction plumbing before starting your own plumbing maintenance company. But since then, Lee, you've also expanded. You've spread your wings and you've started exploring in different avenues of business. So you've started, or you've same as Leroy, you've started a plumbing company from scratch, built that up, ran that, managed that, but then also started in other types of businesses.
Yeah. So thanks, Willem. You know more than what I do.
I have it printed. You see, I have it printed on my lid.
Yeah. So I think everybody knows me as working closely with the PRRB and the current chairman of the PRRB. Not that means anything to me, because my saying says it's not about the title. It's about the person makes the title at the end of the day. But I think for this discussion, from the business aspect that we're talking about, is that I've been in the trenches. I understand that I've come from, even though I've got a degree in construction management and whatever it is, and working in the family business, going through, I understand what the plumbers go through. I understand that cash flow. I understand the issues, and I'm going to ask a question to Leroy just now. I'd love to probe him about something he said. I'd love to have his answer to that one. Are you going to look nervous now?
Yes. Now we start.
But I think it's important for this discussion is that I'm also an entrepreneur of nature. So I've started many different. I used to build coffins, as a part-time thingy. So I used to do. So therefore, I've got a few other business interests as well. Not so much in the plumbing sector per se, in the trenches, digging, and soldering and unblocking drains, as we spoke earlier.
The fact is that you're also a properly qualified plumber.
That's right, 100%.
With enough experience.
Correct, 100%. More than that, got the T-shirts 10 times over from that point of view. So I understand all the aspects of that specific, and hopefully I can contribute to the discussion.
Absolutely. So let's talk about what factors must be taken into consideration, how much it will cost, what you need for the business, and what it will cost.
Well, there's a whole lot of things you've thrown into that specific mix there, but I think where you find a lot of people starting their business, and I think Leroy can contest to it, because he mentioned it, he said that he was working for somebody, and then if you're sitting there and you're going, well, you know what, I think I can do this better, I can do this more effectively, whatever those specific factors in that specific, and that's the starting point. But I think a lot of people don't understand is that then they start off on that sum. are making that decision and going, well, you know what, I can do this thing better. I can do this thing quicker. I can do this thing like this and that. And then they start off thinking. Now, I'm not knocking that he's wrong. But the thing is that, it's like building a building. If you start on the wrong foundation, the buildings are going to go. So yes, you can jump off and start, and you can start sweating and whatever. But if you don't do the planning correctly, because planning it's not difficult. Let me press. It doesn't cost anything. That's in the evenings, doing your calculations, doing the risk. What is the risk versus the rewards, doing your budgets, and then making the decision to move on. But a lot of people go, well, you know what? And this is where I was going to challenge Leroy. Oh, the boss is making so much money. I'm going to go and do it better because I'm going to make all that specific money. But what they haven't done, yes, right or wrongly, they haven't factored in, well, let's go and work it out and let's go and do the exercise. Let's go and do the paper exercise and, dot the T's and actually look at it correctly before jumping into that specific. And that's where a lot of people is that they don't plan correctly. And what do they say? They jump. I can't remember. It says that as you leap before you actually do anything. Checking
look
that
before you leap.
Sorry.
Look before you
leap. From that point of view, I'm not knocking the fact that people who really want to do it go balls for the walls to go and do that specific thing. But that's where a lot of failures take place. Instead of saying, well, let's go back and look at the situation before I leap in. And I want to ask Leroy, and it reverts back to this specific thing. So you said earlier that you looked at your business and your boss was pushing you for that specific thing. Are you telling me you don't do that now?
So I'm hard on myself to do things properly. That was my issue always, was that I wanted to do things properly. It was satisfying to do it right. It was satisfying to do it the way the book says so and the way it needs to be for it to be safe and secure. And for me to be able to say to people that you're not I can guarantee you're not going to have any problems. I hear that a lot, and I knew that a lot of people who said that couldn't back it up. And I like to be able to back it up. So, when you go a bit over the time, it has its downsides or whatnot, but regardless of how far behind I fall, I try to remind myself always that, no, this needs to be done this way. There's a reason for it. Obviously, try and catch up, but don't sacrifice quality in the process.
Yeah.
It does slow me down. I do take longer than others, but I am happy with that, because at the end of the day, I'm happy with my work when I get home.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's definitely, I'm not knocking it from that perspective, obviously. It's just that I just wanted to get your take on the eyes that you had before you left, and then the eyes that you're now a businessman, and you're going, well, okay, maybe. I remember I had a boss. Oh, yes, he was really, really hard when I started off. But I can now reason why he was like he was. It's because of the situation that was in, because it's on the other side of the fence, if you know what I'm saying. And that's what people miss, is they don't look with the eyes on that side of the fence, and they only realize it once they're on that side of the fence, if you know what I'm saying. Then the perception is completely
being in the field and being in the office. Knowing two different places.
Knowing that the next job is also waiting, there's another customer that's waiting for you.
Yeah.
Having mentioned that, you do take a little bit longer not to sacrifice quality.
Yeah.
But now that you know that you're on the other side, you're the person who has your own business, and you know that the income depends on whether I get to that job or not. It does have an effect on, say, okay, I need to hurry it up, but I don't want to sacrifice the quality of it as well. Yeah. And that's where the point comes in that Lee's trying to make. But certainly when you started up your company, factors like, what will I need? I need a vehicle to get to site. You already determined you were going to have a plumbing company. You're going to start a plumbing company. So you needed tools. You needed the right equipment in order for you to execute the work. You needed the knowledge and the skills, which you already had, because by that time you were already qualified and you already had your red seal, as they call it. So that part you already knew. And you needed to know that you needed to have customers and clients. That's a factor to consider when starting up your business, because how do you need to properly sort of promote your services now that you're starting your own company. You can't just expect your previous employers come, people to come with you.
No, you
so
can't
all
poach
of those
clients.
All of those were factors that had to be taken into consideration of how much is it going to cost me to start this company? What do I initially need just to get going? Because you did mention offline before we started recording that, you sort of also then gradually started getting more things into place so that you can expand the type of services that you can deliver.
Yeah. So for me, while I was still working, while I was working under someone else, I was unhappy enough to be well aware of the things I couldn't do, but decide to do it anyways because I needed to get to something else. Thankfully, I had been in my field long enough for friends and family to know what I was doing and what I was capable of. I had also, just before leaving, gotten a call from a friend who was in the BNI group, and I understood how all that worked, how the business connections they would help. So I took almost a leap of faith that was grounded purely on I really want to do my work properly, and if I do this, regardless of what happens, it has to work. And you keep saying that, you keep telling yourself that regardless of how rough it gets, how bad it gets, I need more customers. So then you sit and you phone people, you do your Googling, you do your research, if you on your way from one site to another and you are 20 minutes early and you drive past an estate agent's office, go in and say hello, ask if you can come back at a later stage and drop some cards off. Now, there is so much to consider. In some ways, I think that I was better off than a lot of people. And in a lot of ways, I was worse off than others. But being determined to do it and do it properly is what got me to where I am now.
Now, there is a risk, in ways you were better off and in ways you were worse off, because there's always risk to business and starting your own thing and working for yourself. And I want to talk about the operational cost of running a business, operating a business. And here's where the question comes in about how do you determine costing and pricing? How do plumbers specifically, how do people in business determine what they will charge the customer at the end of the day? Because again, certain things have to be taken into consideration. You have to take in consideration how much does it, plumbers have call-out fees for that matter. They need to know what the distance is that they will travel and work that out according to wear and tear on their vehicles, petrol, fuel costs, time that it'll take there. What things do you consider when working out your service fees? What markup perhaps you put up on materials that are used, if you do, your hourly rates, those kind of things, pricing in general to operate your business? What do you take into consideration?
So I try and be as specific as I can with the materials I'm going to need. If I need to be on site for 2 hours to get my measurements right, I will. You work out how many of each little fitting you need, how many meters of pipe, and you would add up all that because you have to cover the cost of materials. And then you put in space for a little bit extra in case you've missed something. You could always use 2 or 3 extra elbows, or you need another socket, or if you're redoing a whole house, it could be so easy to miss out on a length of copper. You have to make provisions for that. And as for your pricing, you've got the material cost, and then you work out your extra costs. Like you said, wear and tear on the vehicle, time, petrol. Do you need extra people? Is there a cost to have things delivered to site? So there's the cost for the client and then the cost for you. And it's nice to make good money, but you can't stretch it too far. If you think you're worth 800 Rand an hour, for argument's sake, you need to make sure that you really are. And that's actually quite difficult. People think that the final invoice just goes straight into the back pocket. And that's just simply not true.
Absolutely. I think I'd love to continue on that specific point, but I do believe that we are pushing for some time for this episode. So to our listeners and our viewers out there, don't go away just yet. We're just going to go and take a quick ad break. Stay tuned because we'll be right back.
Good day. How can I help you?
Hi, I'm here to log in my COCs, but I seem to be having an issue with my computer.
No problem. But did you know that you can log your COCs using an app on your cell phone?
Oh, what app is that?
It's called the App Plumber. Do you have a smartphone with you?
Yes, I do.
Oh well, let me show you how it works.
Not only can you access your PRB profile on the App Plumber, but you can also earn CPD points while exploring the plumbing industry in the palm of your hand. Download the app from Google Play Store and join thousands of other happy users.
Welcome back. You are still tuned into an episode of Plumbing 101 in which we are discussing the cost of being in business. Now, just before we went into an ad break, we were discussing how pricing is calculated and the operational costs of business and what affects it and what factors should be taken into consideration. So I want to shoot my next question to my two guests about budgeting and how budgeting works and how that links in with calculating your costs. Lee, if you don't mind, let's talk about budgets and what factors to consider, what factors affect our budget, and how does that link in with the cost of operating and the cost of what we should charge our customers.
Yeah, so thanks, Willem. Just before we kick off, with that one, we had a conversation during the break, and something struck me is that people think that this business environment, this business discussion is this all glorified BCom environment. It's not. If you just do the real basic stuff, it's you will be 80% there. Yeah. I can guarantee you. It's that 20% where you start, starting thinking, about how do I fine tune it and, getting to the deeper stuff, like dividends tax and secondary tax, one and the same thing. And, your profits, how do I put it on my loan accounts? That's the more difficult stuff from that point. But if you just do the basics right, you are 80% there. And budgeting is one of the most important basic things of the business. So basic that it even talks to your cost of being in business. It's the fundamental thing. It's because how guys budget in the industry, or how do they determine? They don't start off what it costs to run my business through my budget. They work it out, well, what's your hourly rate? An hourly rate is even wrong because it's not an hourly rate; it's a service rate. An hourly rate, because that's what I'm sidetracking slightly, but because everybody is, well, it's an hourly rate. Well, you pay yourself a nice real salary. No, it's not. That hourly rate encompasses everything else, so therefore should not refer to it as an hourly rate. We should refer to it as a service rate because it's got a whole lot of other elements into it.
I'm going to take that.
Well, it's just those basics and those terminologies. Anyway, getting back to the budget from that point of view and how the two are related is that if you don't, the plumber will go out and he says, well, how much must I charge? Now, he doesn't look at the worth of his business or what his business costs are. He phones up the next plumber and he goes, well, you charge 600 Rand, so I'm going to go in at 550. No, why are you doing that? You don't know what your true nature of your cost is.
Yeah.
Once you understand your true nature of cost, be it 550, be it 800, be 1,000, I don't know what that is because all of us have got a different business model or different costs to be in business. Then you only pitch it to the market, if you know what I'm saying. Because you can't do it the other way around. Because if you want to draw 100,000 Rand salary, well, that's cool, but your service rate has to be balanced against that specific thing. Okay, your budget, 100,000 Rand salary, my hourly rate or my service rate is going to be considerably high versus another person who's at 10,000 Rand an hour, then his service rate will be patch up. So the point I'm making is that it starts with your budget. Your cost to be in business starts with your budget. So you throw everything into your budget. And again, I said in the beginning, this is where people get it wrong. They start off and only then work backwards. So start there. Start with the basic, and your budget is your most basic thing of all. And there's numerous of factors. Let me rephrase it. There are not numerous of things in your budget. It's, the Institute of the IOPSA, Institute of Plumbing of South Africa, has a program where they give you a template to complete. If you go onto the app plumber,
yes.
you go in there, there's a template that you have to complete.
Yeah.
And you just put your factors in and say, well, how much is this? How much is my insurance? This. And if you don't have marketing, then you leave marketing out, if you know what I'm saying. So it's not rocket science just to get to a service rate at the end of the day. So how do you determine that specific thing? You throw everything into your budget and you add everything up. If you want to do it over a year or a month, very simple, add it up. Then you've got to determine, well, do I work 20 days a week? Sorry, a month? Do I work 22? How many hours do I work in? And you got to factor a whole lot of other things, rain days, then you have to factor in, am I working 12 months a year or am I working 11 months a year, if you know what I'm saying? So you factor all those things in. And then you can only determine your rate of what you got to be charging in the industry, if you know what I'm saying. Then, as I said, you pitch it against, are you in the market with regards to the rest of those specific people? Then you will know that, if you understand what I'm saying. Then you take that factor and you bring it into your costs. In other words, where you were talking about earlier on about when you're doing invoicing. So now you bring your hourly rate into your invoice plus your cost of sales. How much material is in all that stuff, and then you calculate it from that point of view. But your budget is your starting point. And your question was, what is it in that? Well, you will only know. Sit down. But it's not a rocket science thingy. And again, as I said, the Institute of Plumbing has got a framework which you can download. You can get it off the app plumber. There it is. And you just fill it in from that point of view.
I think it's what you aim to achieve with the income that you're generating from your business or want to generate from your business. And that is what you then need to budget for when you're calculating your costs.
Correct, 100%. But what people do is they start off by going, as I said to you, they will go and listen to what the employer is charging. They says, well, then they just go with their little calculators, oh, look at that specific thing. And then they go out and say, well, I can work at, if your employer was 800, I can do it at 600 Rand, and I can basically, like you say, pocket all that specific money.
Yeah, that's how people think it works.
And they only realize that afterwards. And these sessions and what the Institute is trying to show you before that, we're not saying don't do it, but have a look at, just prepare yourself, because the failure happens after. I mean, what's the stat like? 80% of businesses fail in the first year.
Yeah. Failing to plan, planning to fail.
But that's also, like you just mentioned, Lee, now it's the value of why we have conversations like this. It's to empower the listener and the viewer out there with the knowledge and to help them see things that they may not have considered before.
Yeah, 100%. And you know what, the reality is we learn every day. I mean, I learn every day.
Yeah, I've learned just being here.
Yeah, 100% from that point of view. And that's about developing yourself. We work that word that, dare I use that word, continuous professional development.
Oh, yeah. Talking about learning, talking about continuous professional development, and I want to go back to focusing on the word professional. When where does being properly qualified and a professional, a registered and a licensed plumber and those kind of things, where does that come into the equation when it comes to affecting your pricing and what you will eventually charge plumbers?
Just because you know how to connect one copper pipe to another doesn't mean that you're doing it at the same level as a plumber. We've gone through a lot of training. There's a lot of theory involved. There's health and safety. There's the hazards of water, the scientific principles of water and how it reacts in certain conditions, and the way that can affect people, families, how it can affect the taps and their longevity, how it affects the pipework through the rest of the house. It's not just keeping the people safe, it's so that the system is safe as well, so that it lasts as long as it's supposed to. There is
and function the way that it's supposed to.
There is a lot of information with regards to being a plumber and why things have to be the way they are. I mean, I would say 80% of what we do that's really important is buried in a wall or under a connection or a fitting, and other people are not going to see it. We're not going to be able to point it out. But in a year's time, when everything starts to leak, then you'll know where it is. Yeah. And the goal is to try and avoid that.
It's about that pride as well, that you know that you're doing things compliantly.
Yeah.
And speaking of pride, it was also one of the things that we spoke about offline before we started recording, that you mentioned how you take pride and sort of educating your clients also, and the value that adds at the end of the day.
Yeah, people, too often people don't know why things are done a certain way. I love it when people ask questions. Why does this have to be here? Why can't we move it there? Or I think it would look better if it were there. It's like, okay, well, it can be, but then this and this has to change. This is the reason why. You'd be worried about the flow inside the pipes, the way it affects the wall. You got to be worried about whether or not somebody else can damage it accidentally or deliberately. You want to make sure that nothing goes wrong with whatever it is you are installing at a later stage. You don't want to just randomly connect a pipe if you've connected it in the wrong place, and that means that you've got no pressure. If your geyser's on the other side of the house and you want another hot water tap outside, you put another heating system outside, because over that stretch of pipe, you lose all that heat. And that's what you tell people. So that also, if someone phones and they have a little DIY project going on, I'm more than happy to tell them the things they should look out for, even what spares they should be using, just to make sure that at the end of the day, they are happy with themselves, they're satisfied with the work, and they know that it's done properly.
Yeah, and Leroy is spot on. Again, it's knowledge. It's understanding that knowledge. But obviously, you can have a person who is also a schneizer and spin that story as well from that point of view. So I think where one of our failures in our industry is that the plumbers are not using the professional body they belong to as a selling point, because everybody can sell that speech, but then obviously knowledge is important to do the right selling pitch. But at the end of the day, by saying, he says, but ma'am, if you don't believe that I'm talking the truth or whatever it is, you're more than happy to go back to the professional body who I am a licensed plumber with, and it gives you the reassurance that I'm talking correctly. And today, take it even a step further, is to say that I'm willing to certify my work through the certificate of compliance, which opens me up to being audited by my peers to tell me if I've done things right or wrong.
It's no longer a client you have to answer to now. It's the entire plumbing board that comes to check and make sure that you're doing your work properly.
There's a lot more to be said about the cost of being in business. But just before we continue our conversation, to our listeners and our viewers out there, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back just now.
The PIRB Master Plumber Recognition Program has officially arrived. As an essential service to society, there must be constant growth and development within this important and ever-changing industry. Developed by the PIRB, the Master Plumber Recognition Program has launched as a new PIRB designation, allowing industry champions to take the lead. Skilled and experienced plumbers equipped to take the lead, enroll today to start your journey in becoming a recognized PIRB Master Plumber. In collaboration with IOPSA, Articulated presents a heat pump installation course with a whopping 10% discount in honor of Women's Month this August. Consisting of 7 modules, this course will provide you with knowledge surrounding the types of heat pumps available, the economic benefits of heat pumps, and an overview of the SANS 135 national standard. For more information or to register for this course and earn yourself 5 CPD points, be sure to visit www.iopsatraining.co.za.
Welcome back. You are still tuned into an episode of Plumbing 101 in which we are discussing the cost of being in business. Now, just before we went into the ad break, we discussed how budgeting works and how figuring and calculating the costing works. We are drawing to a close of this episode, gentlemen, but before we do, I've got one last question. I feel that it's very important and that it's something that many people in business don't understand, especially when they start off a new business and most probably a sole proprietor type of business. When it comes to revenue and profit, Lee, perhaps you can indicate to us the difference between the two.
Yeah, so Willem, it's a very complicated question. You can really track the thing out.
Do a whole episode only on that.
On that specific one. But I think the biggest issue is out there is that, and let me tell you where it stems from. it stems from is because you don't do your basics right. Because once you do your basics right, it becomes so much easier. So what the small businesses do is that because they haven't got a handle on their budgets versus their actuals, and actually getting right down to the last little, not cent, but actually understanding their business through their figures and the paperwork, they land up actually spending, not profit, they're actually spending operating costs. In other words, they think, because that's how plumbers do it, they work out of their bank account. They think, we got money in our bank account, so let's spend. If you know what I'm saying. Not realizing, but wait a second, you spending money that might have been, let's just talk about profits. So profits, who wants his cut at the end of the day? The tax man. When does the tax man want his thing? He doesn't want it every month. And I'm talking profits, I'm not talking VAT if you're running VAT. But the tax man wants his money in 12 months' time. So when he comes at 12 months, you go, wait a second, there's no money in the bank. Yet your auditor or your accountant comes and says, well, you owe 28% on this profit that you've earned, but there's no money in the bank account. And that's where the biggest problem is that they get confused between operating profits versus profits. And then what they do is they get muddled up, and then they just spend the money because the money's in the bank account. And instead of going back to the books, we had a podcast episode with Mandy. Is Mandy
Keel?
Mandy Keel, where her business, as an example, she would take her, and she used, I think it was VAT that she used it as an example, because VAT also becomes a problem, because VAT comes in as cash, but you don't have this bank account, which is VAT and whatever, and she's very disciplined in moving that money out and putting it into a different account. So she knows that is for something that's going to come down the line. So it's exactly the same. But again, going back to it, is that if you just do the basics right, the rest will look after itself.
Leroy, we've come to a close of this episode, and I would like to thank the two of you again, as I did when we started this episode, for your time, your effort in joining us, for the valuable information that you've shared with us. But I'd like to offer you the opportunity to just, if you have any last words to our listeners and our viewers out there.
Leroy?
From my end, it's a little bit cheesy, but I do like to use this a lot in work, is that if you are what you do, then why not do excellence? I just like to work off of that with everything I do.
Well, from my side, I revert back to the things that, we mustn't get lost in that you have to be a BCom guy to do your finances. You just do the basics. We can all add. We could all do our own home budgets. Our home budgets. We says, well, I get a salary, so much less for rent, so much for food, so much. I mean, what's the difference there than within your business? I mean, as one of the closing things is that you wouldn't believe, but the massive corporates work on the basic principles. It's at 20% it becomes a little complex, but they use the basic stuff. And if you just stick to the basics, just go and just find out the basics of business, budgeting, then your actuals, and then the difference between which comes into your revenue and your profits. Stick to those basics and you will be 80% down the road.
And hence there are associations like IOPS or the PRB who can also give guidance, have podcasts and vodcasts and shows like this one to give that information to our listeners and our viewers out there. Again, gentlemen, thanks a stack for having joined me. So that concludes it for myself and our two guests. But to our listeners and our viewers, don't go away yet, because we do have some more industry news for you. Please stick around. We're going to go over to Naomi for some extra news.
Welcome back. In recent roadshow news, the PIRB visited Buco in Kimberley on the 29th of August. And today, on the 31st of August, we are at Burlersal in Bloemfontein. So if you have any questions, please feel free to come and join us and engage us. Now, have you ever faced the frustration and uncertainty when it comes to calculating your cost in business? Now, with the App Plumber, Navigating your business life has become a lot more easier. In your profile, simply click on the Calculate Your Cost feature, fill in all the necessary expenses to your business, and tap on Calculate. And the app plumber will do the rest. Moving on, the end of September will see the announcement of the PIRB's latest leaderboard winner. So keep up your continuous development and stand a chance to win. And to close it off, the Institute of Plumbing South Africa is on the lookout for auditors in Polokwane, Northern Cape, Mbombela, Northwest, and the Western Cape. So if you think that you have the necessary skills and knowledge to become an auditor, then apply today by emailing bianca@iopsa.org. Until next time, bye.